Second, I don't think we've started recording yet. Okay, you can start.
Welcome everyone. I hope you are enjoying today's day. I mean, at TEF and this year's incredible agenda. I'm very happy to be here today to share this online presentation and be accompanied by dear colleagues and friends, I would say, at Respond Crisis Translation, each ready to share their unique insights and experiences. So this afternoon, I am well aware that this is the last session of the day. So after a very long day, but I promise you that, it will be a great session because we will delve into the critical importance of upholding language rights, amidst crisis, and the often overlooked issue of language violence. So Respond Crisis Translation, for those of you who don't know, stands actually at the forefront of this mission, providing a lifeline where communication is paramount. Today we will explore, therefore, the profound impact and, I would even say, indispensability of translation, underscoring its role in preserving humanity and dignity during turbulent times like, human rights or humanitarian crisis. I'd like, therefore, to start by introducing Meg Sears, Operations Director at Respond Crisis Translation. Hello, Meg. Thanks so much for joining today, as I'm well aware that, these times are very busy and hectic for you too. And before, giving the floor to Meg and actually ask her a very first question, I wanted to also inform you that after Meg introduction, we will have also the pleasure to hear from 3 other colleagues and members of the Respond Crisis Translation team, sharing their insights and experiences, and then we will have some time for, of course, the Q&A. So I remind you all to use Slido by going on slido.com and introducing hashtag TEF9. So hello, Meg, again. So let's dive right in. It would be great if you could, of course, introduce yourself and answer a very first question I have for you today. So a lot, is said, or many people here talking about, language violence, but what is it exactly? And how does your collective, actively work, both systematically and in acute crisis response situation, to combat or to tackle or address this form of violence?
Absolutely. First, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting us to be here today with you. It's rare that we get to speak with so many fellow language practitioners, so it's an honor, and thank you for being here with us. And I just want to share my screen. So I'm excited to tell you all about what we do because I think it'll be particularly relevant to this group. But before I do, I just want to briefly tell you who we are. So I'm Meg, I lead operations at Respond, and I've been on the team for a long time and worn many different hats over the years as we've grown. I'm based in Berlin, and I'm lucky to be joined here today by 3 of my wonderful colleagues, Valentina Callari-Lewis, who's based in Buenos Aires and leads on less frequently requested and marginalized languages, Mirkhail, who's based in Toronto, Canada, and leads our Afghan languages team, and Tanya Gregoryeva, who leads our Ukrainian and Russian team and is based in Kiev, Ukraine. So we're here today representing Respond Crisis Translation, and we're a global collective of translators, interpreters, and language activists mobilizing from around the world to support asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, and really anybody in need of language access support in the midst of crisis. So to give you some insight into what it is we do, I want to start by telling you the story of one of our clients, Carlos. Carlos is Brazilian and fled Brazil after his son was killed in front of his eyes by gang members, and he started receiving death threats himself. So he fled to the US, and as soon as he crossed the border, he was deported and separated from his sister and nephews. And he was alone in detention, the only Brazilian Portuguese speaker, and he was unable to get anybody around him for over 6 months. And during this time, he got COVID. This was late 2020. He got COVID and he was quite sick. And he requested an interpreter and medical intervention 10 times and was ignored each time. So we learned about his case through another fellow detainee at the same detention center. And we were able to connect Carlos with an interpreter, who in turn connected him with an attorney who secured his release from detention and got him access to medical care. And he was able to reunite with his family and ultimately get asylum in the US. So this case is really, this describes quite acute language violence. You see clearly how the lack of language access really prevents somebody from getting life-saving support. And we see thousands of cases like Carlos's every year. So part of that is because language is really within the migration and asylum systems in the US. And what I mean when I say that is that the US runs the world's largest detention system. On any given day, there are over 50,000 people in detention in the US. And yet the US government has no interpreters or translators to help detainees understand what is happening around them, what the process of going through asylum is, or which resources exist to support them. Asylum applications are required to be submitted entirely in English. And asylum applications are often hundreds, if not thousands of pages of supporting evidence making your asylum claim. So all of that has to get translated. And yet there's no support or subsidies from the US government to help translate these documents. Then on the other side of this, once you submit your translated asylum claim, judges are reviewing your claim, and they will frequently disqualify asylum claims based solely on language technicalities. So what that looks like is a mistranslated pronoun, a mistranslated place name, a mistranslated birthday. Each of these things can be grounds for asylum disqualification and deportation. Additionally, people in asylum court are regularly denied access to interpreters or provided underqualified interpreters. And literally, we've heard horror stories from our partner attorneys who tell us of interpreters looking at dictionaries in the middle of a courtroom proceeding while they're interpreting an asylum case. They're looking at the right words to use. Or Indigenous language speakers being given French interpreters, not even close to a linguistic match. So these are each examples of language rights violations, and yet currently there's no system in place to track language rights violations, even though they are rampant. Oops, skip the slide. Another really key example of language violence is the systemic and persistent lack of funding for language access work. And this lack of funding for the work that we do incentivizes organizations, even values-aligned organizations, working on the front lines of refugee and resettlement crises. These organizations don't have budget for language access, and so we're incentivized to use machine translation. And Uma can speak more to this. Her team was actually interviewed twice this year in The Guardian and in Rest of World, talking about cases that they'd seen of AI mistranslation in Dari, resulting in claims being thrown out. And yet, asylum and detention is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as language violence is concerned. What we've seen through our years organizing and doing this work is that language violence truly makes access almost impossible for non-English speaking communities across almost every single system, from healthcare and mental health care to social services support, job support, housing, school systems, domestic violence support. You name it, and it's inaccessible without translators or interpreters. In crisis contexts as well, folks urgently in need of just very basic key information or resources and support are not able to access it without language support. So Tanya will speak more to this, but when Russia invaded Ukraine, we had a small team go to the Polish border with Ukraine to try to offer language access support. And what we heard from the team on the ground is that the number one barrier that those folks faced to learning basic things like where to charge their phones, where to find housing that night, how to navigate transportation, each of those processes was impeded without language access. A second example of this was earlier this year, following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. In February, we learned that the Turkish government did not translate key resources into Kurdish. They translated resources into Turkish and Farsi and English, and yet Kurdish was left out, despite the fact that most folks were Kurdish speakers in the impacted regions. So similarly, our teams have been mobilizing on the ground to fill this gap in language access. So this is the reality of language violence, systemically, also around the world in crisis contexts. And what are we doing in response to this? First, we're organizing. We started organizing as a volunteer collective in the fall of 2019, working at the southern border of the US. And as it became apparent really how vast and urgent the need was for our work, we quickly formalized into a 501c3 nonprofit based in the US. And we are now a collective of over 2,500 translators and interpreters, representing 170 languages and working with more than 470 partner organizations that really work on the front lines of the refugee and resettlement crises. And of these 470 orgs, I think 100 of them are based in Europe. So though much of our work happens within the asylum and resettlement systems in the US, we are also working in Europe and North Africa and the Middle East. So in addition to our daily casework working with our partners, we also work directly with individual asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants who reach out for support. And so that's the bulk of what we do. That's maybe 80% of what we do. And then additionally, we also do language rights advocacy for folks who've experienced language rights violations. And what that means is that if your asylum case is denied because of a linguistic technicality, then we will provide an expert declaration explaining that it was a language technicality and it was wrongful grounds for an asylum case to be denied. We also have done language rights trainings for attorneys and legal advocates to help them recognize when language rights violations are happening in the courtroom so we can begin documenting that. And we're currently building out the first ever tracking system to track language rights violations. Perhaps one of the most important pieces of what we do is trainings and job access. So many of the 170 languages in which we work are languages in which there does not exist higher education or certification programs for folks to become translation interpreters. And yet we need these folks to jump into really high stakes to interpret for asylum seekers, to interpret in urgent medical contexts. And so we've worked really hard over the last 3 years to create a robust training infrastructure that allows people who are talented and multilingual to plug into our network and access training, and then begin taking projects, gaining experience, and getting work opportunities. And a really key piece of that has been our goal of economic justice within our work. We've really tried to recruit folks onto the team who are themselves refugees, asylees, and deportees so they can access training and income opportunities. And so far, we've been able to train and pay over 460 translators and interpreters in our network. So another really key element of our training infrastructure is our trauma-informed training. And I think all of us know as linguists that when we're working on really traumatic content, for example, an asylum application, and particularly when that traumatic content echoes our own life stories, there is vicarious trauma. So this training space is created by our 2 training leads to really help folks come together who are working on really difficult case content and feeling impacted so they can process and share key skills about vicarious trauma and how to deal with vicarious trauma as a language practitioner. And then we also work with a network of therapists who are able to provide support to translators and interpreters in our network with difficult cases. So I've touched on this. The bulk of the work we do is asylum work, but we also work in a super wide variety of arenas, including schools, clinics, hospitals, social services, jobs and employment resources, housing and tenant justice, as well as some policy work and access to electoral participation. Really, wherever the need is, we figure out how to meet it. So our work kind of runs the gamut. So this is a brief snapshot of our in numbers. The numbers that to me are so big at this point, it's hard to really, for them to have any meaning. But perhaps the key number is over these last 3 years, we've been able to do $3.3 million of work almost entirely pro bono and serve over 800,000 clients. Okay, and I want to pass it over to my colleagues who can really hear more about what it's like doing this work on the front lines. But first, I want to just give you some grounding context for how their teams came to be. So first, Uma, who leads our Afghan languages team, Uma was maybe the 3rd employee at Respond, and she came on following the government collapse in Afghanistan. In the weeks following the government collapse, she joined the team and built up our Dari and Pashto teams from scratch. And she now has one team of 42 translators and interpreters that have taken over 8,000 asylum cases for Afghans, translating over 5,000 pages and interpreting almost 3,000 hours. And we recently learned that 188 Afghans that Uma's team supported won their asylum in the last couple of months. Uma also worked hard at the beginning of building her team to really recruit folks who were stuck in Afghanistan, who weren't able to make it out, and particularly women and queer folks who might not otherwise be able to access income opportunities. And so funding for our Afghan languages team has really been one of our key priorities. Tanya similarly joined the team just after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we were already getting a lot of cases at that point because we had this team at the border passing out postcards with our information. So we had this influx of cases, as well as hundreds of folks who signed up and wanted to join the team. And Tanya came in and immediately started sprinting, recruiting folks who worked in a really wide variety of language combinations to support these cases, as her team was supporting individual Ukrainians who were fleeing from Ukraine all across Europe. And then she was really hustling to screen folks who'd signed up to join the team. And she currently has 59 Russian and 120 Ukrainian translators, really taken almost 5,000 cases in 16 language nations. And I want to emphasize, and she'll maybe speak more to this, but many of the people that her team has supported have been chronically or terminally ill folks who are fleeing across Europe and need to immediately land in a hospital in their new country. And so her team has been translating their complete medical records, which includes really dense medical language, as well as handwritten doctor's notes, and is in all sorts of new language combinations for her team. So she continues to really hustle. And Val leads our less frequently requested and marginalized languages team, which is kind of a vast umbrella team. It encompasses over 145 languages and really is always growing. Val is constantly receiving requests in new languages and having to hustle to do outreach to be able to meet these urgent asylum requests. So just in the last month, she received cases in Zagawa, Mina, Gare, and Borana, which were 4 languages we'd not yet seen before. And her team includes 500 translators and interpreters. To give you a little sampling of recent projects, this of course is like a drop in the sea of recent projects that her team has worked on, but you get a sense of the scope. Her Kurdish, Somali, and Urdu teams recently translated 21 videos with resources for refugees arriving in Turkey. There's been a surge in Mauritanian Pular cases over the last couple of weeks. So Val has been busy building our Mauritanian Pular team to support asylum seekers at 4 partner organizations. And the Amharic team is currently translating documents for an asylum. Sorry, just knocked a cat off the table to keep him off the camera. Her Amharic team is translating documents for an asylum seeker, for an asylum case for a deaf asylum seeker. So that's just a little overview of what we do. I want to pass it back to Lucio and my wonderful colleagues now so you can hear more in depth about the realities of doing this work.
Thank you very much, Meg. It was just, fascinating to hear more about Respond Crisis Translation, such a meaningful and needed work, I think. And, guys, can you think of over $3 million, dollars, I think Meg said, of, pro bono, work. It's just, amazing. And it's so meaningful. I will just repeat it. So great, such a great work. So thank you for introducing, the rest of the panel, Meg, and hello, Val, Tanya, and Uma. So I'd like, now to hear a bit from you, of course, like I'm sure the audience as well. And I would start with a question, actually a couple of questions to you, so then you can, better develop before we go and we dive into the Q&A with the audience today. So, in this moment of terrible, I would even say overwhelming headlines, really, I think many of us feel overwhelmed or disempowered. We don't know what to do to help, etc. But how do we, as translators and linguists, get involved to enact meaningful change. So it would be great if each one of you could comment on how your work with response crisis translation allows you to feel empowered, first of all, and like you have an agency to affect positive change in people's lives, both on individual level and systematically. And if I may add, if you can also describe maybe more, practically speaking, a moment where you felt that, for example, your work made a tangible, difference in someone's life during a crisis. Thank you very much. Who would like to go first?
I would like to go.
Please, Uma.
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My journey into this field is deeply rooted in my personal experience as an Afghan women refugee with over a decade of involvement in the humanitarian aid sector. It's indeed a privilege to hold the position of leading for the Afghan language team and to be present in at this meeting today. In the
Sorry,
context
Uma, could you please move your camera because we cannot see you?
Actually, I'm really sorry because I tried to figure out, but I'm not able to on it. I don't know what's the
Okay,
problem
don't
with that.
worry. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll go on. Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry. Um, uh, Related to your question, in the context of international crises such as conflict, war, translators play a key role in humanitarian efforts. They help humanitarian organizations communicate with affected people, population, assisted asylum seekers, and provided medical care. This is particularly critical during a crisis, as timely and accurate information can be a matter of life and death, and based on our experience, translator or the bridge in between. At last, I would say I'm so lucky that I'm part of such an incredible team that they assisted and assisting thousands of Afghan, provided over 50 asylum clinics in this year only. And specifically, I would like to mention about one of them that we assisted for 95 hours with the collaboration of 45 interpreters in this clinic, and all 188 cases granted an asylum. So that is the moment that when we heard from our organization was too great moment for us.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Uma. Should we? I guess you're done, right, with your intervention. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Valentina, maybe would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure, of course. So, well, thank you so much for having us here today. When I first joined Respond Crisis Translation, I was a student. That was the year 2021. So I really had no idea of the awareness it would bring into my life because I was pursuing a degree in translation. And until then, I had always heard that you could specialize in business or in legal translation or in environmental translation. But little did I know that I could be an activist for language justice and language access. And I have to tell you, I see meaningful change every day. I see empathy and I see commitment and kindness in my work. I have seen the most terrifying aspects of immigration. But when I look at the translators and my colleagues and everyone involved in our community, I realize that these are translators and they have these incredible language skills who work around the clock. Sometimes they work overnight because the case is urgent to help others. And these are people they've never known. And it's so heartwarming for me to be part of this community. And as the team lead for the less frequent and marginalized languages team, I have a greater understanding of the importance of getting involved and realizing how crucial it is for someone when the right person comes at the right time, as Meg was saying, because they you're going through the most vulnerable and difficult moment in your life when someone is fleeing their country, because we have to remember that they are fleeing their country because of some external reason. So their language, their identity, and their culture that might fade a little in the process of immigration. So, and the information you have available in another language may not be clear for you because you don't speak that language, because you don't speak English or any other language. So, providing the translation of documents, or so that they can have their case heard by a judge, or even translating resources so they know where to access, like Meg was saying, to charge, how to charge their phone, how to request food stamps, for example. It's something so rewarding in my day-to-day life, because I know that we as a community are assisting our clients to help them navigate the difficult journeys they embark on. And this work has allowed me to see how beautiful and helpful translation is for people in the most vulnerable times of their lives. And I'm grateful for being in this position, because I know so many amazing people who want to help. And really, when you hear the good outcomes, it makes it all so worth it. All the sacrifice and the rush to find someone who can help, or to do outreach and find a less frequent language, it makes it also worth it. So it's really an experience that fulfills me in a way that I have never experienced before. And if you ask me about a case, there are so many, but recently we worked on the translation of flyers for parents. These flyers were intended for the parents of undocumented and immigrant children, so that they could attend an event where they would be told what education opportunities their children would have after high school. So knowing that the translation, I just imagine for these parents receiving the flyer in their language and seeing, oh my god, my child can pursue a career, can have an education, can have a better life. That just really, I don't know, it's something that's so rewarding for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. I think, your passion speaks to it, because I can, I can see that. And I think sometimes we don't realize how privileged we are, right? And, how access to information is there for us. And if we just, put ourselves in the shoes of someone who flees their country, not because they just want to make a journey, but just because they need to, they must to, and they cannot speak or read the other language in the country they're in. I think just a little help of a translation can, mean the world to them.
You can make the change. Exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Valentina, for your account. And Tanya, would you like to come in?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to represent Ukrainian-Russian team of Respond Crisis Translation. I am being refugee myself when I had to flee home 2 times. I'm from the eastern part of Ukraine, from Donetsk, that was occupied by Russian aggression in 2014. It's the war and everything that happened is not just headlines. It's a part of my life, and it's a part of everybody of my family and friends' life. So for me, it's just an opportunity to be one with my people and to support them and do my contribution for our own goal, just to survive, to speak our language, to live, and to win, definitely. I just want to mention how the war started to me. It is not just headlines. When I woke up in the morning and I was trying to order the food for my mom's dog's shelter. And I just realized that just the war started, and I remember how I was feeling. I was smashed, I was destroyed, I was helpless, I wanted to shout, and I wanted to run around. I didn't know what to do. And this is what million people of my country felt. There are 18 million refugees from Ukraine, according to UNESCO statistics, that had to flee Ukraine. And like the first days were like terrible because there were lines at the border. People were sitting just like for 3 to 5 days, just sitting on the just dirt at the border trying to cross. And imagine they're ending up in a new country having nothing in their hands, just literally having like no clothes, no anything good, as they had chargers for the phones, and now they end up in a totally new place, totally new environment, not able to speak any word. 18 millions. Imagine how big was the demand to help to these people, and imagine how many people were left in Ukraine just surviving, being under this day-to-day bombing. Like, I'm in Kiev, Ukraine right now, and we had alert today. We had missiles attack today. So for us, it's not a headlines. It's real life, and this way, just the way to survive, the way to just be sane. We had to unite, and other people helped to evacuate my mom, who is 70, and she was left at the front line without medicine. She has diabetes, without insulin. So other volunteers helped her, and I'm grateful to them. Respond gave me an opportunity to contribute, to help my people, and from my side. So I joined Respond Crisis Translation as a volunteer translator and interpreter. And it immediately I felt relieved, like I had an action, it was a way out for my anxiety and despair. So action and opportunity to build a team of people who will help was such great a reward for me. So we did like 14,614 cases of translations and interpretation for refugees, including medical, legal, psychological support, asylum cases of people in Russia who had the courage to speak against the war, and they were basically risking their lives. A lot of them lost their lives, but those who were able to make the way out, including LGBTQ plus asylum seekers who were just made being outlaws just because of their identity, and thousands of cases supporting organizations supporting refugees and asylum seekers or worldwide, and Ukrainian organizations in Ukraine, which is me because working in a daily basis to fight, to win, to survive, and to rebuild Ukraine, rebuild economy, rebuild heritage. It feels so rewarding to be able to support them via translations and interpretations. And I can go endlessly talking about this. I know my time is out. Thank you very much for listening to my story.
Thank you very much to you, Tanya. I would just like to highlight, both Uma and your stories. Actually, I don't work for Respond Crisis Translation, but I would like to thank you both for putting your skills at the forefront of Respond Crisis Translation mission. I think it's really meaningful, and it touches many of our hearts. So I would like now maybe to give the audience the opportunity to ask us ask you questions. So please go to slido.com and introduce the hashtag TEF9, which is the number of our session. There are already some questions. There is someone who, anonymous, but someone is asking basically, how can I do it to achieve it? What current projects or internships or job roles exist that work with this? So who would like to maybe answer? What basically how to do to join you guys?
Yeah, I will happily jump in. And I just want to share this slide with you. This is how to join us. Is just to go to our website, respondcrisistranslation.org/English/get involved. And if you fill out a short form with your language combination, some basic information about you, you can join the relevant language team for you. And I do want to say that because of how asylum works, because of migration processes, sometimes there are tons of cases in certain languages, and other times there really are very few. But if you feel particularly passionately about doing a certain kind of project or about doing research about language access or violence, please reach out. Really don't hesitate to get in touch with your team lead. We're a collective. We're really a grassroots community org. So whatever you want to do, there is a place for you at Respond.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Meg. So let's take another question. So in particular, you already explained how to join you. Someone is particularly, again, anonymous, but someone is particularly interested to become a member of a project that aims for the equity, preservation, and dispersion of endangered or minority languages and cultures. So I don't know if maybe Valentina would like to speak to that.
Yes, of course. There is, maybe we have nothing going on at the moment, but that doesn't mean we can get started. So if this person would like to reach out to me, I can also drop my email in the chat, and they can communicate directly with me, and we'll see what we can do. What are the ideas? Definitely, yeah. That is something we would love to work on as a collective. As Meg said, we can find a place for your ideas and whatever you want to work on. Thank you so much.
Can I just briefly add something that we know Lucio through our work with the Global Coalition for Language Rights. And I recently was at one of our coalition meetings, and there were a couple of groups working on language preservation. So that's another arena in which, if you're passionate about language rights, and particularly preservation of marginalized or indigenous or rare languages, that's perhaps another arena to get involved. And then also just to say, depending which languages you're thinking about or which languages you speak, we do get cases in a super wide variety of languages. So there really could be cases for you on Val's team.
Yeah, I would never turn anyone away. Never. If I see someone speaking a language I've never heard of, I go straight to them and tell them, please join us. Because if you're a translator, interpreter, please join us.
You guys are my heroes, really, because I have to say that, we translate a lot into, local, endangered languages, sometimes at Amnesty as well. But sometimes I see your post on LinkedIn, Valentina in particular, looking for languages I have never, ever, ever heard of. And still, it means that, these guys, find, new colleagues, volunteers, professional translators who are there to help and to change the life of someone who needs it. So I wanted to say that the anonymous from before is Carla from Spain. Sorry, she couldn't add a name before, but thank you, Carla. There is another question. I think we have still a bit of time. So do you have, David asks, do you have any testing procedure for people to join you? Is there a way of vetting the translator skills? It's a good question.
Yes. Who would mention?
I can answer that if.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, whom? Yeah.
So we assess the language skills. Even though I lead the less frequent and marginalized languages team, I have PMs on the most requested languages in LFR. LFR is the acronym for my team, that they screen the new translators and they assess the quality of translators. And it also happens that we come to build a big network of people we trust and rely that connect us with other translators they know and that are professional. When I say professional, I don't want to say maybe the path we all know as going to university, getting your degree. When you are in such a diverse team as mine, you realize how many different paths for education there are in the world, and that doesn't mean that no translator is less professional than the other. So really, it's a matter of connections, networking, and also finding professional translators who reach out to us, and we know that they have good language skills, either because we know them or because someone in our team has connected us with them. I hope that answers the questions.
I think you absolutely did, and I cannot agree more with you, because I can see, I mean, I think sometimes we have to move away from our Western minds. There aren't translation universities everywhere in the world, but it doesn't mean that, those professionals who might, follow other career paths might be specialized in a particular field that we need for those type of translation, and actually they could be better translated than anyone else. So we have to be a bit more, I think, elastics sometimes, but thank you. So I think we are very close to the closure of the session. So I'd like to actually ask Meg to maybe close this session with a message to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I just wanted to say that in these moments in the world where terrible, overwhelming disasters and crises are occurring, and particularly crises that affect our loved ones or impact us, I know for me, at least, it's easy to feel powerless. Like, what can I possibly do as one person to change any of this? And then in addition to that, what can I possibly do that aligns with my interests and also feels sustainable? And in my own time, like Val and Tanya and Uma, in my work with Respond, I really have felt the power of community in coming together with people who are values aligned and believe in and want to spend their time doing this work together. And it's been really steadying. It's been a grounding source of relief for me and meaning. And truly, whether it's climate change or oppressive migration and resettlement systems or ongoing and escalating genocide happening in the world, there is work that we can do as language practitioners to support human rights and really uphold and further access, economic justice, compassion, dignity for people all around the world. So if this work speaks to you, if you feel values aligned with us, please do join us. We need you. Your background, your experience, your expertise, your language combinations, your ideas. There is a place for you. And thank you so much for being here today with us. It really has been an honor.
Thank you very much, Meg, Tanya, Uma, and Valentina. It was a really, really wonderful presentation. And I've just pasted a link to get involved with the Respond Crisis Translation in the chat. Please visit their website. And thank you very much for joining today, and have a fantastic evening and an amazing day tomorrow, the last day of the TEF 2023. Thank you.